First question, Nassim, and I guess it's more really of a subject matter I'd like you to talk about. You focus a lot on connection, on how when you study the universe, you find that everyone, every atom, every soul, every human being, every plant, we're all connected. Let's start by talking about connection.
Right. Well, you know, it came from a more philosophical and intuitive sense when I was younger, that I had in school these thoughts because I didn't pay attention much to what was going on up front. I commonly was thinking about all kinds of other things, and I start to feel like the space between things may not be empty. You know, we only experience a very small part of what's going on in the space. There's all kinds of electromagnetic fields, there's all kinds of stuff that's happening in the space that we don't experience directly. And I started to think maybe the space between things is not empty, but it's full and it connects all things. But eventually, as I studied physics and I understood some of the basis of quantum field theory, I realized that actually we had found that the space is not empty at all, but full of energy. And eventually I wrote equations, I wrote physics on the space. I described the space. And when I wrote these physics, it outputted very fundamental constants in physics, like the mass of particles and their radius and the structure of galaxies and the structure of the universe and all these things. And as I wrote these mathematics, something remarkable happened. Something I instinctively had come up with when I was young, but that just came out in the mathematics just beautifully. And that is that all the information of every other particles in the universe, every atom in the universe, seems to be present holographically in each atom, which connects them all through this wormhole network in the structure of space, like an information highway that is transferring information at very, very high baud rate, and that permits systems to self-organize. So it's really at the deep level that I see the connection between all things, not in only a philosophical way, but actually writing physics on it actually works.
And this connection is the basis for a lot of your research. And the research you're doing right now is astonishing, because if Nassim's research is able to prove some of the things he's talking about, it has huge implications for humanity. For example, warp drives. For example, the ability to control gravity, to within the next 75 years be able to go on a family vacation to Jupiter and back in record time by leveraging the control of gravity and wormholes. So let's talk about that. What are you researching right now?
Well, actually, to go to Jupiter, you won't need a wormhole with a gravitational drive. But if you want to go to Alpha Centauri, you'll need one. Yes, I'm working on these things because not only that, you know, when you calculate the amount of energy, obviously, if everything is connected through this wormhole structure, the micro wormhole at the quantum level, which I'll present this tomorrow, the energy level in a centimeter cube of space is enormous. And if we extracted just a billionth of a percent of the energy that's in a centimeter cube of space in the structure of space-time, we could run the world for millions of years.
Can we equate consciousness to God? Equate thoughts and mind to God?
Well, it depends what you mean by God. You know, that's the thing. The precision of language is so difficult. If you mean by God that it's something that's omnipresent, omniscient, that's everywhere, that knows everything, that organizes everything, then you can associate that directly with the quantum vacuum oscillations. Right. And if that's true, then and that's consciousness, then there absolutely you can make that analogy. But if you make the analogy without the mechanics without saying either what God is or consciousness is, then you're not much more advanced.
So I take it you don't buy the standard model of physics and you don't buy the standard model of God.
No, yes, I don't. And the standard model of physics, I wouldn't say I don't buy it. I modified it because it had big holes. At the foundation of physics, there was big holes in the understanding of physics. Like if you asked, what is mass? What is electromagnetic fields? What is charge? What is gravity? All this was really like unknown, like the source of it, you know? We wrote physics equation, like one of the most commonly used physics equation, the most known, E equals mc squared. It's a beautiful equation, except that it doesn't tell you anything about anything, meaning if you ask, what is m in the equation? Mass. We say, we don't know what mass is. So that means, and then you ask, well, what is c? Well, we don't know why c is c. We don't know why the speed of light is the speed of light. So that means you have two unknowns on one side, the equal sign. That means you don't know what E is, right? Because it's equal to unknown. So now you have an equation. It's beautiful. There's an equivalence between three unknowns. So you know nothing about nothing. So I wanted to know.
So this is a question from Clement Strook. Clement, are you in the room? Please stand. Okay, Clement is not here, but this is the question Clement asked. Once artificial intelligence becomes self-aware of its own existence and consciousness, how will this impact human consciousness? Well, I guess there's a category to that question, right? Firstly, do you agree that AI can attain consciousness as you define it?
Right. This is really important because it's becoming so popular right now, and I'm asked this question often, and I had to meditate on it, and it was a short meditation because it occurred very quickly to me that there's nothing artificial about consciousness. And so the concept of artificial consciousness or artificial intelligence didn't, it doesn't compute. There's already a computational issue. And so there's nothing artificial about intelligence. And what I mean by that is intelligence has nothing to do with crunching data. It has nothing to do with... Intelligence is a beautiful emergent field of information that includes emotions and all kinds of things that has nothing to do with crunching ones and zeros. Crunching ones and zeros will never get us to an intelligent, being.
Right.
So do I believe that artificial intelligence will occur, meaning that we can place consciousness in an external device? Yes, I believe we will get there. How we will get there? We will get there when we stop trying to do it by crunching ones and zeros, and we learn how to tap into this fundamental field of information, of consciousness, and loop it back on itself on an external device, and then it will be self-aware. And when it becomes self-aware, it will have emotions, it will have empathy, it will have every characteristic that a human being has.
Now what would that look like? Would that be using biological means combined with electronic means? What do you mean by tapping into consciousness?
I think it will be using plasma, high energy plasma structures in a very confined region of space that creates singularity, that creates a tap into the field, and then the system will become self-loop and become self-aware.
Wow. Okay, so now that we've started talking about plasma is one of these states of matter. Scientists are always discovering new states of matter. Right now they are around 7. And plasma is the most dominant state of matter in the universe.
Correct.
Now,
it's mostly of what we see in the universe, and what we call not plasma is really plasma that's cooled off.
I see.
science delusion is the belief that science already understands the nature of reality in principle, leaving only the details to be filled in. This is a very widespread belief in our society. It's the kind of belief system of people who say, I don't believe in God, I believe in science. It's a belief system which has now been spread to the entire world. But there's a conflict in the heart of science between science as a method of inquiry based on reason, evidence, hypothesis, and collective investigation, and science as a belief system or a worldview. And unfortunately, the worldview aspect of science has come to inhibit and constrict the free inquiry, which is the very lifeblood of the scientific endeavor. Since the late 19th century, science has been conducted under the aspect of a belief system or worldview, which is essentially that of materialism, philosophical materialism. And the sciences are now wholly owned subsidiaries of the materialist worldview. I think that as we break out of it, the sciences will be regenerated. What I do in my book, The Science Delusion, which is called Science Set Free in the United States, is take the 10 dogmas or assumptions of science and turn them into questions, seeing how well they stand up if you look at them scientifically. None of them stand up very well. What I'm going to do is first run through what these 10 dogmas are, and then I'll only have time to discuss one or two of them in a bit more detail. But essentially, the 10 dogmas, which are the default worldview of most educated people all over the world, are first that nature is mechanical or machine-like. The universe is like a machine, animals and plants are like machines, we're like machines. In fact, we are machines. We're lumbering robots, in Richard Dawkins' vivid phrase, with brains that are genetically programmed computers. Second, matter is unconscious. The whole universe is made up of unconscious matter. There's no consciousness in stars, in galaxies, in planets, in animals, in plants, and there ought not to be any in us either, if this theory is true. So a lot of the philosophy of mind over the last 100 years is trying to prove that we're not really conscious at all. So the matter's unconscious, then the laws of nature are fixed. This is dogma 3. The laws of nature are the same now as they were at the time of the Big Bang, and they'll be the same forever. Not just the laws, but the constants of nature are fixed, which is why they're called constants. Dogma 4, the total amount of matter and energy is always the same. It never changes in total quantity, except at the moment of the Big Bang, when it all sprang into existence from nowhere in a single instant. The 5th dogma is that nature is purposeless. There are no purposes in all nature, and the evolutionary process has no purpose or direction. Dogma 6, biological heredity is material. Everything you inherit is in your genes, or in epigenetic modifications of the genes, or in cytoplasmic inheritance. It's material. Dogma 7, memories are stored inside your brain as material traces. Somehow everything you remember is in your brain in modified nerve endings, phosphorylated proteins. No one knows how it works, but nevertheless, almost everyone in the scientific world believes it must be in the brain. Dogma 8, your mind is inside your head. All your consciousness is the activity of your brain and nothing more. Dogma 9, which follows from dogma 8, psychic phenomena like telepathy are impossible. Your thoughts and intentions cannot have any effect at a distance because your mind's inside your head. Therefore, all the apparent evidence for telepathy and other psychic phenomena is illusory. People believe these things happen, but it's just because they don't know enough about statistics, or they're deceived by coincidences, or it's wishful thinking. And dogma 10, mechanistic medicine is the only kind that really works. That's why governments only fund research into mechanistic medicine and ignore complementary and alternative therapies. Those can't possibly really work because they're not mechanistic. They may appear to work because people would have got better anyway, or because of the placebo effect. But the only kind that really works is mechanistic medicine. Well, this is the default worldview, which is held by almost all educated people all over the world. It's the basis of the educational system, the National Health Service, the Medical Research Council, governments, and it's just the default worldview of educated people. But I think every one of these dogmas is very, very questionable. And when you look at it, they fall apart. I'm going to take first the idea that the laws of nature are fixed. This is a hangover from an older worldview before the 1960s, when the Big Bang Theory came in. People thought that the whole universe was eternal, governed by eternal mathematical laws. When the Big Bang came in, then that assumption continued, even though the Big Bang revealed a universe that's radically evolutionary, about 14 billion years old, growing and developing and evolving for 14 billion years, growing and cooling, and more structures and patterns appear within it. But the idea is all the laws of nature were completely fixed at the moment of the Big Bang, like a cosmic Napoleonic code. As my friend Terence McKenna used to say, modern science is based on the principle, give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. And the one free miracle is the appearance of all the matter and energy in the universe and all the laws that govern it from nothing in a single instant. Well, in an evolutionary universe, why shouldn't the laws themselves evolve? After all, human laws do, and the idea of laws of nature is based on a metaphor with human laws. It's a very anthropocentric metaphor. Only humans have laws. In fact, only civilized societies have laws. As C.S. Lewis once said, to say that a stone falls to earth because it's obeying a law makes it a man and even a citizen. It's a metaphor that we've got so used to, we forget it's a metaphor. In an evolving universe, I think a much better idea is the idea of habits. I think the habits of nature evolve. The regularities of nature are essentially habitual. This was an idea put forward at the beginning of the 20th century by the American philosopher C.S. Peirce. And it's an idea which various other philosophers have entertained, and it's one which I myself have developed into a scientific hypothesis, the hypothesis of morphic resonance, which is the basis of these evolving habits. According to this hypothesis, everything in nature has a kind of collective memory. Resonance occurs on the basis of similarity. As a young giraffe embryo grows in its mother's womb, it tunes in to the morphic resonance of previous giraffes. It draws on that collective memory. It grows like a giraffe, and it behaves like a giraffe because it's drawing on this collective memory. It has to have the right genes to make the right proteins, but genes, in my view, are grossly overrated. They only account for the proteins that the organism can make, not the shape or the form or the behavior. Every species has a kind of collective memory. Even crystals do. This theory predicts that if you make a new kind of crystal for the first time, the very first time you make it, it won't have an existing habit. But once it crystallizes, then the next time you make it, there'll be an influence from the first crystals to the second ones all over the world by morphic resonance. It'll crystallize a bit easier. The third time, there'll be an influence from the first and second crystals. There is, in fact, good evidence that new compounds get easier to crystallize all around the world, just as this theory would predict. It also predicts that if you train animals to learn a new trick, for example, rats learn a new trick in London, then all around the world, rats of the same breed should learn the same trick quicker just because the rats have learned it here. And surprisingly, there's already evidence that this actually happens. Anyway, that's my own hypothesis in a nutshell of morphic resonance. Everything depends on evolving habits, not on fixed laws. But I want to spend a few moments on the constants of nature too, because these are, again, assumed to be constant. Things like the gravitational constant, the speed of light, are called the fundamental constants. Are they really constant? Well, when I got interested in this question, I tried to find out. they're given in physics handbooks. Handbooks of physics list the existing fundamental constants, tell you their value. But I wanted to see if they'd changed. So I got the old volumes of physical handbooks. I went to the Patent Office Library here in London, and they're the only place I could find that kept the old volumes. Normally people throw them away when the new values come out. They throw away the old ones. When I did this, I found that the speed of light dropped between 1928 and 1945 by about 20 kilometers per second. It's a huge drop because they're given with errors of only fractions of decimal points of error. And yet, all over the world, it dropped, and they were all getting values very similar to each other with tiny errors. And then in 1945, it went up, 48, it went up again. And then people started getting very similar values again. I was very intrigued by this, and I couldn't make sense of it. So I went to see the head of metrology at the National Physical Laboratory in Teddington. Metrology is the science in which people measure constants. And I asked him about this. I said, what do you make of this drop in the speed of light between 1928 and 1945? And he said, oh dear, he said, you've uncovered the most embarrassing episode in the history of our science. So I said, well, could the speed of light have actually dropped? And that would have amazing implications if so. He said, no, of course it couldn't have actually dropped. It's a constant. So, well then how do you explain the fact everyone was finding it going much slower during that period? Is it because they were fudging their results to get what they thought other people should be getting, and the whole thing was just produced in the minds of physicists? We don't like to use the word fudge. I said, well, what do you prefer? He said, well, we prefer to call it intellectual phase locking. So I said, well, if it was going on then, how can we be so sure it's not going on today? And that the present values are produced by intellectual phase locking. And he said, oh, we know that's not the case. I said, how do we know? He said, we've solved the problem. And I said, well, how? He said, well, we fixed the speed of light by definition in 1972. So I said, but it might still change. He said, yes, but we'd never know it because we've defined the meter in terms of the speed of light. So the units had changed with it. So he looked very pleased about that. They'd fixed that problem. But I said, well, then what about big G? The gravitational constant, known in the trade as big G, is written with a capital G, Newton's universal gravitational constant. That's varied by more than 1.3% in recent years. And it seems to vary from place to place and from time to time. And he said, oh, well, those are just errors. And unfortunately, there are quite big errors with big G. So I said, well, what if it's really changing? I mean, perhaps it is really changing. And then I looked at how they do it. What happens is they measure it in different labs. They get different values on different days, and then they average them. And then other labs around the world do the same, and they come out usually with a rather different average. And then the International Committee on Metrology meets every 10 years or so and average the ones from labs around the world to come up with the value of big G. But what if G were actually fluctuating? What if it changed? There's already evidence, actually, that it changes throughout the day and throughout the year. What if the Earth, as it moves through the galactic environment, went through patches of dark matter or other environmental factors that could alter it? Maybe they all change together. What if these errors are going up together and down together? For more than 10 years, I've been trying to persuade metrologists to look at the raw data. In fact, I'm now trying to persuade them to put it online on the internet with the dates and the actual measurements and see if they're correlated, to see if they're all up at one time, all down at another. If so, they might be fluctuating together, and that would tell us something very, very interesting. But no one has done this. They haven't done it because G is a constant. There's no point looking for changes. You see, here's a very simple example of where a dogmatic assumption actually inhibits inquiry. I myself think that the constants may vary quite considerably, within narrow limits, but they may all be varying. And I think the day will come when scientific journals like Nature have a weekly report on the constants, like stock market reports in newspapers. You know, this week big G was slightly up, the charge on the electron was down, the speed of light held steady, and so on. That's one area, just one area where I think thinking less dogmatically could open things up. One of the biggest areas is the nature of the mind. This is the most unsolved problem, as Graham just said, that science simply can't deal with the fact we're conscious. And it can't deal with the fact that our thoughts don't seem to be inside our brains. Our experiences don't all seem to be inside our brain. Your image of me now doesn't seem to be inside your brain, yet the official view is there's a little Rupert somewhere inside your head, and everything else in this room is inside your head. Your experience is inside your brain. I'm suggesting actually that vision involves an outward projection of images. What you're seeing is in your mind, but not inside your head. Our minds are extended beyond our brains in the simplest act of perception. I think that we project out the images we're seeing, and these images touch what we're looking at. If I look at you from behind, you don't know I'm there. Could I affect you? Could you feel my gaze? There's a great deal of evidence that people can. The sense of being stared at is an extremely common experience, and recent experimental research suggests it's real. Animals seem to have it too. I think it probably evolved in the context of predator-prey relationships. Prey animals that could feel the gaze of a predator would survive better than those that couldn't. This would lead to a whole new way of thinking about ecological relationships between predators and prey, also about the extent of our minds. If we look at distant stars, I think our minds reach out in a sense to touch those stars and literally extend out over astronomical distances. They're not just inside our heads. Now, it may seem astonishing that this is a topic of debate in the 21st century. We know so little about our own minds that where our images are is a hot topic of debate within consciousness studies right now. I don't have time to deal with any more of these dogmas, but every single one of them is questionable. If one questions it, new forms of research, new possibilities open up. And I think as we question these dogmas that have held back science so long, science will undergo a reflowering, a renaissance. I'm a total believer in the importance of science. I've spent my whole life as a research scientist, my whole career. But I think by moving beyond these dogmas, it can be regenerated. Once again, it can become interesting and, I hope, life-affirming. Thank you.
It's important to recognize that our body is really the product of our thoughts. We're beginning to understand in medical science the degree to which the nature of thoughts and emotions actually determines the physical substance and structure and function of our bodies.
We've known in the healing arts of a placebo effect. A placebo is something that supposedly has no impact and no effect on the body, like a sugar pill or something. You tell the patient that this is just as effective. And what happens is the placebo has the same effect, if not greater effect, than sometimes the medication is supposed to be designed for that effect. So they found out that the human mind is the biggest factor in the healing arts, more so than sometimes the medication. If somebody is in a situation where they're sick and they have an alternative to try to explore what is in their mind creating it versus using medicine, if it's an acute situation that could bring death to them, then obviously the medicine is a wise thing to do while they explore what the mind is about. So you don't want to negate medicine. Every form of healing has a place.
There is only a stream of well-being that flows, you know. It is a stream of pure positive energy. And the universe, all that we know, is abundant with only that. This is a world that is based upon well-being, and well-being dramatically abounds. And when you are allowing that stream to flow in its fullness, you feel very, very good. And when you are pinching it off a bit, you feel not so good. There is only a stream of goodness or well-being which you are allowing or not. and your magnificent emotions are telling you what the mix is, how you're doing in your allowing or your resisting of this connection.
You know people who have had terminal disease. Stop and think of the word dis-ease. Hyphenate the word. That's a body that's not at ease.
We've got 1,000 different diagnoses and disease out there. They're just the weak link. They're all the result of one thing, stress. And you put enough stress on the chain, you put enough stress on the system, and one of the links breaks.
Our physiology creates disease to give us feedback, to let us know we have an imbalanced perspective and we're not loving and we're not grateful. So the body's signs and symptoms are not something terrible.
The question that's frequently asked is when a person has manifested a disease in their body temple or some kind of discomfort in their life, through the power of right thinking, can it be turned around? And the answer is absolutely yes.
On November 23rd, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I truly believed in my heart, with my strong faith, that I was already healed. During the day, all day long, I would just say, thank you for my healing. On and on and on I went, thank you for my healing. I believed in my heart I was healed. I saw myself as if cancer was never in my body. One of the things I did to heal myself was to watch very funny movies. That's all we would do is just laugh, laugh, laugh. We couldn't afford to put any stress in my life because we knew stress was one of the worst things you can do while you're trying to heal yourself. From the time I was diagnosed, which was November 23rd, to the time I was healed totally was approximately 3 months. And that's without radiation and chemotherapy.
Well, we come with a basic program. It's called self-healing. You get a wound, it grows back together. You get a bacterial infection, the immune system comes and takes care of those bacteria and heals it up. The immune system is made to heal itself.
Dis-ease cannot live in a body that's in a healthy emotional state. Your body is casting off millions of cells every second, and it's creating millions of new cells.
In fact, literally, parts of our body are replaced every day. Other parts take a few months, other parts a couple of years. But within a few years, we have a brand new physical body.
If you have a disease and you're focusing on it and you're talking to people about it, you're going to create more disease cells. See yourself living in a perfectly healthy body. Let the doctor look after the disease.
Can you feel the difference between having painful arthritis in your hips and feeling fearful about it, or having painful arthritis in your hips and feeling hopeful about it? The difference between fearful and hopeful is the difference between recovery or not.
Happier thoughts lead to essentially a happier biochemistry, a happier, healthier body. Negative thoughts, stress, have been shown to seriously degrade the body and the functioning of the brain, because it's our thoughts and emotions that are continuously reassembling, reorganizing, recreating our body.
Remove physiological stress from the body, and the body does what it was designed to do. It heals itself.
I've seen kidneys regenerated. I've seen cancer dissolved. I've seen eyesight improve and come back.
I always say that incurable means curable from within.
You can change your life and you can heal yourself.
Well, my story begins on March 10, 1981. It really changed my whole life. It was a day I'll never forget. I crashed an airplane. I ended up in the hospital completely paralyzed. My spinal cord was crushed. I broke the first and second cervical vertebrae. My swallowing reflex was destroyed. I couldn't eat or drink. My diaphragm was destroyed. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was blink my eyes. The doctor, of course, said all my life I'd be a vegetable. All I'd do is blink my eyes the rest of my life. That's the picture they saw of me, but it didn't matter what they thought. The main thing was what I thought. I picture myself being a normal person again, walking out of that hospital. The only thing I had to work with in the hospital was my mind. As long as you have your mind, you can put things back together again. I was hooked to a respirator, and they said I'd never breathe on my own again because my diaphragm was destroyed. But this little voice kept saying to me, breathe deep, breathe deep. Finally, I was weaned from it. They were at a loss for an explanation. See, I could not afford to allow anything to come in my mind that would distract me from my goal and from my vision. Well, I set a goal to walk out of the hospital on Christmas. That was my goal. Months later, I walked out of the hospital on my own 2 feet. They said it couldn't be done. That's a day I will never forget. For people that are sitting out there right now watching this program that are hurting, if I wanted to sum up my life and sum up for people what they can do in life, I would sum it up this way in 6 words. Man becomes what he thinks about.
What is Qigong? Qigong refers to either a singular form of exercise or a systematic practice, either in form of movement or simply with tranquility, centered with Qi. What is Qi then? Qi is a very important term for Chinese culture, for traditional Chinese medicine, particularly for Taoist medicine. As the saying goes, 人活一口气. A human being essentially lives on Qi. We human beings come from Qi and we back to Qi. So our physical body is actually not that important because our life vitality is chiefly above the, inner Qi. So to practice Qigong means to enhance your Qi, to strengthen your Qi, to better your Qi, to circulate your Qi. We say, 药补不如食补, 食补不如气补. In a special situation, we need a certain medicine. Very much, we should have a very good way of diet. But in the long run, in the fundamental way, so how to enhance your Qi, that's priority. So, well, this wall is very old. And actually, Qigong, if we explore its history, it's even older. 1974, there's an excavation of a very beautiful chart that will date back to the Western Han Dynasty, 202 BC, with the very many pictures, the posters of the Daoyin practicer. What is Daoyin then? Daoyin comes from a statement, 导气令和, 引体令柔. Externally, to move your body and become more soft. Internally, to circulate the Qi and becomes more harmonious. This already you find something, the sign of the Qigong. the origin of Tai Chi is from Wudang Mountain. So just see, that's the statue of Zhang Sanfeng, the founder of Tai Chi Chuan. So we have Tai Chi Chuan, we have meditation, we have Daoyin, we have Qigong. So what's the relationship? What's the difference and the similarity? Sometime I would have the students who inquire, apart from Tai Chi Chuan, do you also teach Qigong? This sounds a little silly because all our exercise, it's for the purpose to enhance your Qi. So Tai Chi Chuan is a kind of Qigong in a moving style and with meditative manner. And what is meditation? Meditation is a kind of Qigong chiefly in form or practiced in form of tranquility. What is Daoyin? Daoyin is what we say today Qigong, exhale, both with the external movement and internal harmony. This is like my dad.
Your dad is.
你做可别，别，他在拍个东西。Although I say Tai Chi Chuan is a kind of Qigong, Daoyin is Qigong, particularly we have some Qigong forms like 5-animal Qigong, 八段锦 Qigong, and 6-word healing Qigong. This is the first move of 八段锦. 两手托天理三焦. So since we say this is Qigong, so the coordination with the inner Qi is a must. It's not merely your hands up and down. We have inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. So this one, in the Tai Chi beginning, we always have this. So this imagine is upper, we connected with the heavenly Qi. Down, we are absorbing the earthly Qi. In the middle, we are enhancing our human Qi for the purpose to achieve harmonious Qi. I can feel the power of Qi. I can benefit from the universal Qi. The Taoist practitioners, they have realized this. That's why we have been practicing Qigong. I hope you can also obtain benefit from Qigong practice.
I think there's 4 components that really make yoga what it is. One of these, of course, is the most obvious one, which is the physical postures, the stretching, the exercises, the movements, the breathing techniques, the relaxation techniques. These are an important component. That's working the body to affect our global functioning. Another critical area is the idea of self-regulation. The ability to control our internal stress response, to control our emotion response. This is basically reflected as resilience to stress and equanimity in the face of emotions, and that leads to a psychological self-efficacy. Another really key area is the cultivation of mind-body awareness. The sense of being able to feel and experience what's going on in the body, and also to experience what's going on mentally, to be able to observe the flow of thought. And this kind of cultivation of mind-body awareness leads to an increased mindfulness that can change behaviors in a very positive way. And then the final component, which is really reflecting the traditional origins of yoga, is the idea of experiencing these deeper states, these spiritual states, if you will, transcendent states. Even if they're short-term, these kinds of experiences that you get in deep meditation can really be transformative for people and bring them to a positive lifestyle, to have them gravitate towards positive goals in life, to improve and enhance their life meaning and purpose.
For those who have experienced the benefits of yoga for themselves, they don't need any evidence, they don't need any research to convince them that yoga can help. However, there are others who do like a little bit more of a, a robust, scientific, systematic way of looking at what's actually going on rather than, the anecdotal evidence that so many people give. So what I've been doing recently is research in the field of yoga for depression and anxiety disorders. The most significant result that we found was the reduction in measures of depression. So we compared the group of people who were doing the yoga practice. It was done over 6 weeks, and the control group was continuing with their regular treatment. And we saw a significant difference between the two groups. We saw a 33% reduction in the group of people who were doing the yoga practice. We saw a significant reduction in scores in anxiety, in overall psychological distress. We saw an increase in resilience. That's a really important measure in mental health. We saw increases in the frequency of positive experiences that people were reporting, and conversely, a reduction in the frequency of negative experiences. The average amount of yoga that people were doing was 12 minutes on a regular basis, most days of the week over 6 weeks. Probably the most important measures were the reduction of the depression and the anxiety scores, but each of the other measures gives us a much more overall picture of improvements in mental health. The evidence supports the whole idea that if people do something that includes movement, breath, mindful attention and relaxation, using the framework of yoga, a little bit each day really does bring about some pretty significant results.
The most important scientific principle on which the whole philosophy of yoga rests is prana with space. I'm sure you've heard this term very often, give me some space. Yeah? But actually we need to create that space in the body, we need to create that space in the mind. So when your mind is clogged with thoughts, you need to flush them out, remove them, and that's what meditation is all about, to empty your mind. Similarly in a body, when we are doing asanas, what are we doing? We are stretching out the body, we're creating that much needed space. So we need to give this intercellular space. And when space is there, prana flows. And when there is prana, there is wellness.
The most important thing that I see in terms of yoga on a physical level is to establish connections in the body. And the connections come through the channels in our body, which in yoga they call nadis. And what moves through these channels is energy and information, which in yoga they call prana and chitta. But physically, these channels are blood vessels, nerves, lymphatic vessels, acupuncture meridians, just to name the main ones. And prana is things like heat, electrical, electromagnetic, electrochemical energy flooding through the different channels of the body, and also energy-carrying molecules like glucose, ATP. Then, of course, information, or chitta, is the information that might flow through nerves, and also electromagnetic energy that flows through the body carrying information, and also information carrying molecules such as hormones, neurotransmitters, immunotransmitters. And so physically and energetically we have energy and information flowing through the body, and to enhance the flow of energy and information through these channels in the body, That's the most important thing to make yoga happen in the body.
One thing I like to say to people is that yoga has obviously proved itself over tens of thousands of years, right? Yoga has had a chance to prove itself over time, but it is important for a lot of people to really have that belief in yoga, that they have an understanding of it from the Western scientific point of view and model.
In terms of the evidence that's there for the psychophysiological effects of yoga practices, I think historically, even going back to the 50s, there's a lot of research that shows the ability of these practices to enable people to manage their stress response, the stress system. And this is one of the major reasons why yoga people practice yoga. It's to enable them to cope with stress and emotion in a big way. It's one of the biggest reasons why people come to yoga classes, is to cope with stress.
Breath is the most powerful tool that everyone has within their reach to bring their stress response right under their control. The most direct way of doing that is by taking fewer breaths within a period of time and trying to fill your lungs and expand your lung volume with every single breath, and trying to increase that as far as you can from one breath to the next. When we look at studies of people who perform pranayama breathing or yogic breathing, where they prolong every breath, so they breathe less frequently and deeper, we find that it's possible to reduce blood pressure by controlling breathing. Now, blood pressure is governed by the sympathetic nervous system, and the sympathetic nervous system is a messenger of the stress response. So you can see what we're doing to the stress response simply by modifying breathing. Now, within the yoga postures, as we go from one posture to another and we're creating a challenge that our mind has to constantly deal with. So if we're standing on one leg or our muscle is contracting and we're having to bring our thought right back, one of the things we can do to help ourselves is controlling breathing. Because as the prefrontal cortex, or parts of it, are working to redirect attention, we are also trying to get to grips with the stress response and calm ourselves down. And using breathing as a tool adds to this. So breathing plus the effort of regulating your thoughts both enhance the parasympathetic signal and bring the sympathetic nervous system signal down. And hence, moving out of the yoga studio, this reflects on life in general. So when we are faced with a stressful situation, we remember to do exactly the same thing we did in that yoga room, which is control the breathing and redirect attention using our mind, using the parts of the prefrontal cortex. So breathing is an extremely powerful tool which can be applied both within and outside of the yoga room, but we can practice using it within every yoga posture.
The world is undergoing a transition, and that's why we see all the chaos that's going on in the world. It basically says the way we have been living on this planet is not sustainable, and that we're undermining the ecosystem. For us to survive, we have to profoundly change the foundation of human behavior, because we're radically undermining the environment. What is the resolution? The answer is to change the way we respond to life on this planet. To understand that we are more powerful than we ever thought. If we took that power and used it in a way of harmony, connectedness, union, the fundamental definition of yoga is union. This is the union, first, of the individual, healing themselves in the sense of taking back the power over their behavior. When we strengthen ourselves as individuals, then the collective nature of individuals is much stronger and then has a greater influence on the planet. So those that engage in yoga are actually engaged in a practice of evolution. Those are the ones that said, yes, I will fix myself so I am in harmony and I am in health. And when those around me are doing the same, harmony and health will be just a natural characteristic of the world we live in.
I think we're at a very special time in society. We are seeing an explosive increase in the popularity of yoga and contemplative practices like mindfulness. This has enormous impact for society. Recent surveys have shown that 10% of the American population is now practicing yoga. We're at a changing point where these practices can actually start to have a global impact on the direction of society. By changing the individuals through these practices, by making them more aware, more self-regulating, more immune to stress, more compassionate, more high-minded, less materialistic, as this gets into society, as it gets through our schools, as it becomes a part of our culture, we have the opportunity to be able to witness this transformation in society as a whole, to really function as human beings at the level which we're capable of functioning, to really be the compassionate and giving beings that we're capable of.